From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I hope you've had a great week, everyone, and I think we're all coming off that exciting news of last week related to Blessed Carlo Acutis, who will be now Saint Carlo coming up. We're thinking sometime in 2025 for that Jubilee year. It was exciting to talk to his mother last week, so tune into the audio archives of that one, where I got to ask the very rare question to somebody who has a son who's going to be a saint. How does that feel? That was a great interview. We're grateful to Antonio Acutis for joining us on last week's show. And this week we're going to be talking about future saints as well. We'll be talking with Roy Wenzel about Father Emil Kapuan and his cause, and Erin Von Uffel of the Sistemry de Mandat Grancey cause. And we picked those two, of course, because their death anniversaries were just in the recent past. So I think that's a good reason to highlight these two future saints whose causes are run out of the United States. Check out my program, They Might Be Saints, about Bishop Alphonse Gallegos. It airs on Wednesday, June 12th at 8 a.m. Central Time. He strolled the streets of Sacramento, saving souls by visiting families and mixing with the lowriders in the Latino community. I'll be profiling the Bishop of the Barrio. That's Alphonse Gallegos. Check that one out. That's one of my favorite ones that we filmed in California a few years ago. Check out as well, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, an episode on Our Lady of Loretto. That one airs on Saturday, June 16th at 6 p.m. Central Time. And the Holy House of Loretto is where the Virgin Mary is believed to have lived and received the Annunciation. But how did it get from Nazareth to its current home in Italy? I investigate that one. There's some interesting theories about that, but there's some interesting evidence as well. So check that one out. Explore with the Miracle Hunter or Loretto on June 16th at 6 p.m. Central Time. Later in the show, we'll be looking at the 365 Days with Mary project for June 9th. We've got the Holy Mary of the Walnut devotion from Rieti in Italy in 1505. And the Might Be Saint of the Day is Blessed Anne Marie Tagi, who lived from 1769 to 1837 in Italy. And the question of the week, why are all canonization miracles medical healings? I'll give that one a shot later in the show. And the Might Be Saint of the Day, and a Eucharistic miracle from Honduras that happened on June 9th. And that is from the year 2022. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week. We ask a trivia question and give it a prize. The Miracle Hunter image of the faces of Mary. My friends, people who know me, know that I love trivia. You might find me playing at a bar some random night. But this is Catholic Pub Trivia. And so the question from last week was, who was the last person canonized in the United States? And that answer was Junipero Serra, who lived from 1713 to 1784, and he was a priest of the Franciscan Friars Minor from Majorca in Spain. He eventually moved on and went to California. He was declared venerable on May 9th, 1985, and beatified in 1988 by Pope John Paul II, but then he was canonized by Pope Francis in 2015 when the Pope visited the United States. And the question for this week, we're going to stay on the theme of Americans on the path to sainthood. The question is, who was the first American to be declared blessed who hasn't yet been moved to saint? It's kind of a tricky question. The question is about who was the first American to be declared blessed who hasn't yet been moved to saint? If you think you want to know that answer, want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to miraclehunter@ewtn.com or questions@miraclehunter.com, and we'll be seeing if you have the right answer. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Roy Wenzel, author of The Miracle of Father Kapaun, priest, soldier, and Korean War hero. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. People who tune into this show or tune into my EWTN series, They Might Be Saints, on Fridays on EWTN, know that I love talking about future saints, especially future American saints. And in my opinion, perhaps maybe it was COVID cutting things short, as it did for a lot of people in a lot of ways. I believe that Father Emil Joseph Kapaun is perhaps the next venerable that we'll see coming from the United States. He's a soldier and Korean War hero and served in World War II and the Korean War. And his story is absolutely amazing. And perhaps even more incredibly, it seems like they have a couple of miracles already to go that has been investigated by medical experts and are truly amazing stories of the intercession of this incredible priest. And so we're so grateful today to be joined by Roy Wenzel, the author of The Miracle of Father Kapaun, priest, soldier, and Korean War hero, and also the producer of the Emmy Award-winning documentary Once Was Lost about his life as well. Welcome back to the program today, Roy Wenzel.
I'm glad to be here.
It's great to have you back, and I think that people really need to know the story of Father Emil Kapaun. This is something that a lot of people can get excited about, feel inspired by, and many Americans don't even know this story, that we have this future saint on the cusp. I really do believe that he will be the next venerable in our church if things move forward like I expect that they will. So he's a great person to get to know. So for those people who don't know, please tell us, who was Father Emil Joseph Kapaun?
Well, he lived only to the age of 35, and the first 34 years of that are, by journalistic standards, pretty boring. He was a Kansas farm kid in central Kansas, fairly to the edge of poverty farming with his family, and from an early age, it made it known that he wanted to be a priest, even before he became a boy in the local tiny little church in the tiny little community of Pilsen. And he did become a priest in this tiny little town, hardly ever got out in the world, but the guy ended up being incredibly, extraordinarily heroic. Joined the army as a chaplain in World War II, didn't see any combat then, and then went back to his little town after the war, after serving in India and Burma, a couple of places. And then, just before the Korean War broke out, and before anybody knew it was going to break out, he rejoined the army because he liked the whole adventure thing, and was in Japan with the 8th Cavalry Army Regiment in 1950 when the Korean War broke out, and that infantry regiment was one of the first to be sent from Japan and from U.S. forces in Japan to try to stem the tide of the North Korean invasion. And he survived another 6 to 7, 8 months under horrific combat conditions. Early on, the army was always outnumbered, and the North Koreans were using everything from tanks to mass suicide charges into the American machine guns to try, and they knocked the Americans all the way back down to a tiny little toehold at the bottom of South Korea, and then rallied and advanced rapidly all the way to the North Korean border with China. And there were battles along the way, and he was absolutely amazing. He was like an Indiana character in not only his heroics in dragging wounded soldiers off the battlefield, but in hyping them up and making them feel good about themselves under horrible conditions of combat and stress and hunger. He was constantly doing for people. People joked that he never slept. He would take dictation from wounded soldiers and write letters to their mothers and fathers back home. He would run off into the distance and come back to the line of march with apples in his pocket or something to hand out. And then his unit was essentially wiped out just south of the Chinese border. He was heroic there, too, so those who didn't die were forced marched to a prison camp. So he did all of these heroics in the battlefield, and then there were just incredible heroics from about November until he died the following May in 1951, where he stole food from the guards, defied their brainwashers. They were trying to get the soldiers to turn on their own country and, make recordings denouncing the U.S. He stood up to the guards. They were starving in this camp. So he would give away his own food to try to get the soldiers from stealing from each other, and they just adored him. He also snuck out constantly, crossed the wire, snuck out, came back, with his pockets full of food. The officers were separated from the enlisted men, and you could get in real big trouble if you went over to the enlisted men. He was an officer, and he did this all the time and had prayer services in the huts. And in those prayer services, they weren't just prayer services. He rallied all these guys to stay alive because they were starving. They had on summer clothes, and it was like 40 below by December. And he rallied them with prayer and with little talks and acts of kindness. And then when they saw him stand up to the guards and the brainwashing, man, they would just do anything for this guy. Eventually, he starved himself. They were all starving. They died by the hundreds in this camp. Eventually, he succumbed to starvation and diseases that were in the camp. It was pretty horrible. And they came out of the survivors of this camp came out of the war telling everybody what an incredible guy this was. It wasn't just that he was incredibly brave, he was also incredibly clever. He kept hundreds of people alive that would have died. He literally saved hundreds of lives by doing, he would take roofing tin, pieces of broken roofing tin from bombing, and he would take a stone, because he had no tools, and then he would pound on this piece of roofing tin until he made a pot that didn't leak. And then, because they didn't give them water either, he would scrape snow into this thing and melt it down and boil it, and that prevented dysentery. And so he taught other people how to do that. So I talked to about a dozen of his POW friends, and I kind of rolled my eyes at first when they said that he saved hundreds of lives, because that sounds like an old fish tale. But I think it's true. I think he did that. Not only saving a whole lot of people on battlefields, but then the whole cooking pot and dysentery thing probably saved hundreds.
Absolutely amazing. We're talking today with Roy Wenzel, the author of The Miracle of Father Kapaun, about the priest, soldier, and Korean War hero that is on the path to sainthood. And from what you can tell in the interviews and your research, did people view him as a saint or a saintly figure after they came back from war?
Ironically, a lot of the soldiers that lobbied for sainthood, that lobbied the priests and investigators to make this guy a saint, are Protestants and Jews, mostly Protestants. I mean, the Catholics in the camp did that too. So, yeah, they all tried very hard to talk to everybody after they came home for decades. They kept this little flame burning. One of them, Mike Dow, who's still with us, lives down in the Houston area, tried immediately after returning to the United States to get the Medal of Honor, to get him recommended for the Medal of Honor, wrote the whole thing with help from generals, and they turned it down at that time. So the church launched an investigation soon after the war to see whether he was worthy of sainthood, and they all chimed in. They gave testimonials, they gave audio recordings, they wrote stories, they wrote letters, and eventually in 2013, President Obama gave the family the Medal of Honor for him. Sainthood investigation is still going on, and it's been going on since essentially 1953.
And when we look at the sainthood process today, of course, listeners to this show know the path from servant of God to venerable to blessed to saint. And he's a servant of God at this point. Is there any movement on his canonization cause that we can look forward to?
Well, the main guy that has been appointed essentially by the Vatican to run point on this is a guy that I just talked with yesterday, Father John Hotsey from Father Capon's old diocese of the Wichita Diocese in Wichita, Kansas. And he, about 10 years ago, sent what amounted to 2 bed loads of documents with recordings and physical, records of what he did. So the investigation has been incredibly detailed, thorough. So the dozen POWs that I talked with, plus, maybe another 20, 30 odd that other people interviewed, that's all in Rome. There's all the newspaper stories, the television, documentaries, everything that's ever been done about him is now in the possession of the Vatican. But they run, the Vatican investigators run on their own timetable.
That's right.
Father John has joked with me that, it took him 500 years to give the title to Joan of Arc. So, been since 1953 with our guy. So, we'll see.
There you go. It's always a long process. The church moves sometimes at a glacier's pace. We're talking today with Roy Wenzel, the author of The Miracle of Father Kapaun. And there was some interesting news that came out not too long ago about the discovery of his body. Tell us what that news was and your involvement in all of that.
Well, he died in the camp, as I said, a combination of starvation and disease and murder. The POWs that knew him say that the Chinese guards essentially murdered him not by shooting him or hitting him in the head, but they saw that he was declining in health, and so they sped that along. And toward the last, they actually isolated him and denied food and water to him. He was already so frail he couldn't stand up and could barely speak. So they essentially just, I hate to say it, but they just kind of had a couple of starving POWs dump his body in a shallow hole behind this little shed where he died, covered him up, and that was it. And so there were hundreds of other POWs who died, and their bodies were treated similarly, usually in mass graves. He ended up in a single grave. And everybody came home in 1953, 2 years later. Everybody. The survivors came home, and the North Koreans, as probably everybody knows, they don't have a lot of use for us in America, and so they're very difficult. They did return bodies right at the end of the war, and that is key. They returned a few hundred bodies, remains, including from the prison camp, and because he was a famous war hero by then, at least in the military and among some church people, there's been this desire to find him. And the POWs all told him it's impossible. Everybody ended up in a mass grave along a riverbank, so the river's probably flooded a few times. So, the POWs thought it was impossible. But as it turns out, he was sent home. And as part of a agreement it was actually the Chinese, because they had entered the war in 1950, late 1950, and they were a little more cooperative at the end of the war than the North Koreans, so they shipped a bunch of skeletal remains home to us. A lot of them, I think 800 odd or so, ended up as buried as unknowns, as they called them, in the Punch Bowl Cemetery on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. That's where Honolulu is. And then when DNA came along and became a thing in the late 90s, there was this renewed, could we identify some of these 800? Well, there were terrible technological problems in doing that, but eventually, they at great expense, they figured it out. And so for the last 10 years or so, they've been digging up guys buried in the Punch Bowl. So the military takes this very seriously. They spend millions of dollars every year, not only searching for remains in Vietnam or the Pacific Islands and South Korea, but they make a hell of a good effort to try to identify people who are unknowns buried in cemeteries in Europe and in Hawaii and elsewhere. And so, just amazingly, to everybody involved with the Father Kapaun story, they found him in 2021. They identified his remains as one of the unknowns. And, of course, this was a big deal, not only because he was a Medal of Honor soldier, but also a candidate for sainthood. And so I'd been covering this story since 2009. We wrote the book, The Miracle of Father Kapaun, in 2013, and went to the White House. So I was there for the Medal of Honor ceremony. So 2 years ago, I was retired, but when I heard that they found his body, I called up my old outfit, the Wichita Eagle newspaper, and volunteered to come out of retirement, and because I knew the story and had boxes and file cabinets full of stuff on him. And so Travis Hine, my project story partner, and I teamed up again. We spent 6 months piecing together the story about how they found him, which is just absolutely amazing. It's an amazing story, even if you don't care about Father or even if you're not Catholic. The story of how our military relentlessly went after this, trying to find him, spurred on by these really, really elderly men now. There's only 2 or 3 of them left alive. But for over the course of 70-odd years, they kept that torch burning, and they were the reason he got the Medal of Honor. Besides his own heroism, they just kept hammering on this and knocking on doors and writing to people and insisting, if possible, we really want him found and brought home. And so they did. They brought him home, and two of those POWs, Mike Dow and Paul Roach, were allowed just the day before they interred him in the cathedral here. They went to the funeral home. I was there for that too, Travis and I, and they were allowed. They opened the casket. His skeleton was incredibly, remarkably intact, and they not only got to say goodbye to him, but with the family's permission, with the Kapaun family's permission, they touched him. They got to put their hands on their old friend, and that's probably the most moving, incredible thing I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Roy Wenzel, author of The Miracle of Father Kapaun, for joining us on today's program, telling us the incredible story. And your film, Once Was Lost, actually won an Emmy Award, as you told me off air. And so that's an incredible accomplishment for you. So thank you so much for your work, bringing this future saint to light for us. And hopefully in due time, we'll see Father Emil Kapaun named a blessed, a venerable blessed, and then a saint. And for people who want to find out more about you, Roy, and your work, what's the best place where they can go?
Just Google my name. It's all out there, Roy Wenzel, and Once Was Lost is the documentary, as you said, and The Miracle of Father Kapaun.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Roy Wenzel, for joining us on today's program.
Thank you.
God bless. That was Roy Wenzel, author of The Miracle of Father Kapaun, and also the Emmy Award-winning producer of Once Was Lost. So check that one out. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Yeah, I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I always like the email questions, of course, but I also like doing question and answer at the talks I give. I travel around the country and give something like 20 talks a year at different parishes or conferences or shrines. I've been talking these days about Eucharistic miracles. So for people who want to have me to your parish to talk about Eucharistic miracles in this time of Eucharistic revival in our church, you can go to my website, miraclehunter.com, and click on the Contact tab, and you can send me a message that way. But I do like getting those questions, and one really interesting question that I got through email this week says, Dear Miracle Hunter, I have a question for you, or perhaps you could discuss this matter on one of your programs. Why is it that miracles only relate to health issues? And for instance, can a person be canonized when two miracles are always related to a miraculous physical healing? Can it be related to a different matter? In particular, why do we have, when we consider we have so many troubles in today's world? And the second part of that, she says, do you know of miracles that are not related to health issues? Thank you. God bless you, Maria. Well, thanks, Maria, for your question. It's a good one. And there's a very simple answer to why the medical healings are the ones that are used for canonization causes, because they have a very clear before and after. Oftentimes, there are x-rays or MRIs or testing for a disease that is proof positive that you've got it. And then when you take the similar test after you've been healed, the x-ray or the MRI or the blood test, and it shows that you no longer have a problem, then they can sort of compare apples to apples and say, we have proof positive that a miracle did in fact happen. And so that is one of the reasons why that they do it that way. If there were other miracles that had sort of proof positive recordings of what happened before and what happened after, perhaps those could be considered as well. But there are only a very few cases that I'm aware of that don't relate to medical healings. And of course, we're not counting those equivalent or equipolant or equivalent canonizations of a pope. A pope can kind of swoop in and take someone from blessed to saint without the miracles. So that's a case of there not being a miracle. But in those cases where there are miracles, there's a couple interesting ones. Blessed Irene Stefani, she was invoked for some people who were trapped in a church during wartime, and they were running out of water. and the holy water fount began to multiply water, and the people survived. And that's a fascinating one. And relatedly, you might say, Blessed John Macias, also now Saint John Macias, he has a food multiplication miracle where this chef who was taking care of homeless people in a shelter, when he arrived, he realized that there was not enough meat and not enough rice for the big crowds of people who were showing up. So he prayed to Blessed John Macias for a food miracle, and the meat and the rice were said to multiply. And that was the miracle used in his canonization. So we have a couple interesting miracles like that. I'm sure there's others. I'm just not aware of them. All the others that I know of are medical healings. So thanks so much for your question, Maria. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, send me an email at miraclehunter@EWTN.com or questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe we'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. Every week we talk about the Marian devotion as it lines up exactly to the day's date. We all know Fatima May 13th, or Guadalupe December 12th, or Lourdes February 11th, but there's a different other Marian devotion for each and every day of the calendar year. And for today's day, June 9th, we have Holy Mary of the Walnut from Rieti in 1505. And the story goes that a young man prayed fervently to the Blessed Virgin Mary for his healing, the healing of his brother who was very sick. And one day on June 9th, 1505, Mary appeared to him and promised him that his brother would be cured. In fact, shortly after it happened, in gratitude, he built a church. A statue of Our Lady of Grace was placed inside. In 1690, the coronation of the statue was celebrated. The sanctuary of the Madonna remains in this town even today, Madonna di Torano. If you want more information on this fascinating devotion or any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions from around the world, you can connect to the website, 365dayswithmary.com, pick up the book, or download the free app from the iOS App Store. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week, and we've been doing it this year for the first time, where we take a miracle that happened on a day that lines up to the day's date. And so we have a story from just a couple of years ago, June 9th, 2022. The Catholic Church was celebrating the liturgical feast of Jesus Christ, Eternal High Priest, and that's celebrated the Thursday after Pentecost, when Jose Elmer Benitez Machado, he arrived before anyone else at the chapel of El Espinal community to celebrate the liturgy of the word and distribute to the faithful the hosts previously consecrated by the priests of the diocese. About 60 families live in El Espinal, and they spread throughout the mountainous region, dedicated mainly to architecture, agriculture, raising cattle, pigs, and poultry. And there are barely 15 families who attend the Liturgy of the Word every Thursday, conducted by lay people, since they don't have a priest based in their town. Now, Benitez was appointed as an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion 2 years ago to attend the pastoral needs of the chapel dedicated to the Apostle James. At about 5 p.m. local time, the Liturgy of the Word began. When it was time to distribute the Eucharist, Benitez opened the tabernacle and noticed that the corporal, the cloth underneath, made of linen usually, under and folded under the wooden ciborium and in a white satin cushion, showed large stains that seemed to be of human blood. Almost 3 months later, the bishop ordered some scientific tests to be carried out at the Santa Rosa de Kapuan Medical Center, about 30 miles from there, to evaluate the oxidation and dilution of the apparent blood. And they concluded that the material was not available to carry out an analysis. The corporal was sent to a toxicological center in Tegucigalpa, the capital, where Dr. Hector Diaz de Valle, who holds a doctorate in chemistry and pharmacy and analytical toxicology. Initially, it was ruled out that the stains were of wood resin and animal blood. Later tests showed that the blood was actually human and blood type AB with a positive Rh factor, the same as the Eucharistic miracle of Lanciano in Italy, as well as that found on the Shroud of Turin, also in Italy. So if you think that the blood type AB is a common one, turns out that the World Population Review portal in Honduras says that less than 2.5% of the population in that country has that same blood type. So that's the fascinating Eucharistic miracle that was declared approved coming out of Honduras just 2 years ago. Let's take a look at the sainthood news. We do this every week, as well as we talk about the people coming down the pipeline. Try to give you an update on the future saints of our church. On May 23rd, Thursday, the Holy Father Pope Francis received into audience His Most Reverend Eminence Cardinal Marcelo Semeraro, the prefect for the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, and during this audience, the Supreme Pontiff authorized the same dicastery to promulgate the decree regarding the martyrdom of the servant of God Stanislav Kostka Strike, a diocesan priest born on August 27th, 1902 in Poland, and he was killed out of hatred of faith, also in Poland in 1938. And the Dicastery for the Cause of Saints website says he was a diocesan priest. On the day of his death, while he was celebrating Mass, he most likely saw the murder among the present. In the imminence of the sacrifice, his last thought was to protect the children who were in the church, who he removed from the pulpit. And that's today's might be saint of the day, or we could say the saint on the path to sainthood, and that is a blessed. And we have him with one miracle. He will move on from being blessed Stanislav Kostka Strike to Saint Stanislav. So that is a new future saint coming down the pipeline. Let's take a look at the might-be saint of the day. For today, we've got Blessed Anna Maria Taigi, who lived from 1769 to 1837 in Italy. She was born on May 29th, 1769 at Siena, Italy, as Antoine Marie Giannetti, and she was the daughter of Luigi and Maria, and her father was a pharmacist in Siena, Italy, but his business went bankrupt when Anna Maria was 5 years old, and the family moved to Rome in search of work, but Luigi could only find a job as a household servant and was married on January 7th, 1789, to Domenico Taigi, a butler to the noble family of Chigi. She was married for 48 years and the mother of 7, 2 of whom died very young. And so that was Anna Maria Taigi, and she had many charismatic gifts, and she had lack of concern about worldly affairs, and she often was the topic of gossip and slander, but she was the recipient of public veneration soon after her death, and her cause for canonization began in 1863. She died June 9th, 1837, in Rome of natural causes, and her body is considered to be incorrupt, even though her remains have been transferred several times, and she's interred at St. Cristogono Church in Trastevere in Italy. And so you can go to see that yourself even today. And on March 4th, 1906, she was declared venerable and blessed. And May 30th, 1920, by Pope Benedict XV, then she was declared blessed. And so that was Blessed Anna Maria Taigi. With one more miracle, she will be moving on to Saint Anna Maria Taigi. And then for people who want to keep up to date on these saints on the path to sainthood, we have They Might Be Saints. Check out this week, They Might Be Saints. Bishop Alphonse Gallegos, he strolled the streets of Sacramento, saving souls by visiting families and mixing with the lowriders in the Latino community. I'll be looking at that profile of the Bishop of the Barrio, Alphonse Gallegos. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Erin Von Uffel, the promoter of the canonization cause of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey from France. Now the cause is run in the United States. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. On this show, we talked earlier today about Father Emil Kapuan, the future saint from Kansas. And we've got another future saint to talk about today. And in my opinion, perhaps she has the most fascinating of all the future saint stories of causes run here in the United States. And that is of her life in France, then her life in Turkey, and her founding of the Holy House of Mary in Ephesus. It's a truly incredible, almost an Indiana Jones style story. And we were so blessed to be able to feature her story on a very early episode of They Might Be Saints. And so people can find out more if they go to EWTN EWTNRC.com, you can see the episode or purchase the DVD for the episode related to Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey. And I'm so excited today to talk to the promoter of that canonization cause of Sister Marie, and that is Erin Von Uffel. Welcome to the program today, Erin.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm thrilled to be able to talk about Sister Marie to your audience, and since you're a miracle hunter, we're hunting a miracle for Sister Marie.
That's right. It's always great to talk with you, and it's great to have you back on the show. And yes, we're hunting for miracles for Sister Marie because as of right now, she's a servant of God. She'll move to venerable, and then she'll need those two miracles to move on to blessed and to saint. And the story of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey is truly remarkable. I can't help but say that of all the sainthood causes I've looked into, hers is perhaps the most amazing, the life that she lived, from where she started to where she ended up, and some of the great contributions she had, especially related to the House of Mary. Let's just dial it back a little bit. Please tell us about the early life of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey.
Sure. Sister Marie truly lived a fairy tale life. She was born in a castle. Her mom and dad were the Count and Countess of Grancey. They had the town named after them. Everyone in the village came to their property to go to Mass at the collegial church that was named and sanctioned and officiated by the popes themselves. She comes from a rich history of generational graces that flowed through the families. Her saints were saint that started the Memorare. We've got different saints that Pierre the Venerable, who was the first person to translate the Quran. She's got two popes in the family. Both of them had to do with different reasons why the Franciscans today oversee the Holy Land. They've been in charge of all of the holy sites, and it's interesting because from that beginning, God had placed his seed inside of Sister Marie to plant this beautiful blossoming lily to become a daughter of charity, who then went from her beautiful castle where she was being served to serve others. She worked as a nurse, as a pharmacist, as a teacher, and in the House of Mary with orphans in several places in France during wartime. So she really experienced very difficult times where she had to provide for not only her sisters but for all of the children when there really were no provisions, and she was able to get the people around her to rally to help one another and to also help her own people. After all of the children were settled and everything had been taken care of in her orphanages, God gave her a new mission, and that was to go and find the house that the Blessed Virgin Mary lived in with St. John the Apostle.
And tell us how she knew where to go for that. Where would that information be about the House of Mary?
So at the time that God was stirring this in her heart, a new book had hit the press, and it was written by Clemens Brentano, who was the scribe for Anne Catherine Emmerich, now St. Anne Catherine Emmerich. And St. Anne Catherine Emmerich had visions of the Blessed Mother's life. She was given incredible gifts of being able to see the past, the present, and the future. And she described who would have been coming and going from the house. So we know that all of the apostles visited the home. We know that St. John built the home for her after Jesus died, and on the cross, know this from the Bible, from John 19, Jesus said, "Behold your mother, mother, behold your son." And from that moment on, St. John took the Blessed Virgin to live with him. And when things got very difficult in Jerusalem and they started to kill everyone, especially from the moment that St. John's own brother was murdered, they decided to get out of Jerusalem and to take care of the Blessed Mother. And they brought her to Ephesus, which was a much more religiously tolerant city in that time. And they didn't live right in the city. They lived in the outskirts, up in the mountain. There was a mountain called Nightingale Hill, and they made a stone house that is still there to this day. And Anne Catherine Emmerich gave almost like a treasure map, your Indiana Jones effect here, of if you followed what Anne Catherine Emmerich wrote, there's no way you wouldn't make it to the house, which is still standing today, which is quite remarkable, because if you've ever been to the Holy Land, you know that you have to go down many, many, many layers of foundations before you get to something original. However, just like the Blessed Mother has been preserved, the home that she lived in Ephesus was also preserved. There were pine trees that were behind it, and before it it was the sea, and from her home she could actually see the island of Patmos, where St. John received the book of Revelation. So if St. John wasn't with her physically in the house, she could see where he was. It's just a remarkable story. And anyone listening who would like to read the story, we have a book that you can get. It's The Life of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey and Mary's House in Ephesus. And it goes into all of the different details. You could get that at tanbooks.com. I have a phone number. It's 800-437-5876. That's 800-437-5876. And Michael did a docudrama for EWTN, The Journey of Sister Marie. And again, you can get that through EWTNRC.com.
Absolutely. That story is truly amazing of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey. And what I found when we did the research on this and we put together that program, one of the things I found was so fascinating is, sure enough, she discovered this home through the writings of Anne Catherine Emmerich, and she was able to locate that house. And then through her connections, her family's wealth, she was actually able to purchase that house of Mary and preserve it, which is an absolutely amazing thing. I assume in that region, it's mostly Muslim territory, so having a
Absolutely.
Christian enclave there is truly amazing.
Right. And the Daughters of Charity, they're one of the only orders that you are allowed to use your own wealth from your family or your inheritance for the glory of God. And so God had already arranged for her to be in a family that would have so much money. If anybody's been to Paris and stayed in the Ritz Hotel, that was one of the many residences of the Grancey family. So she went to her father and she said, okay, if I were to have been betrothed to one of the royal houses throughout Europe, like her sister had been, you would have given me such and such amount of money. I would like to use that money to preserve this home for all time. And you can just imagine if one of your children came to you and said, there's a dirt plot, we see some stones, and there's women who are working tobacco fields who lay their leaves on this home, but we think it's the Blessed Mother's home. We'd like you to buy it. Most people would say, you're out of your mind, and if anyone else in Europe finds out about this, we will be laughed off of every list of parties and, social gatherings, because that's what a lot of the people were really into at that time. Although her family was very holy, they still didn't want to have that kind of notoriety if it went south. But Sister Marie is not the type of person that you can say no to. And when she knew that this was something that God truly was telling her to do, she was able to pray and persevere, and yes, she was given the money. And then she had to find a way also to get transferred over to Turkey, because it's not like you could just raise your hand and say, well, now I'd like to go to this part of the world. You're a servant of God. You have different people in charge. And just at that time, Pope Leo XIII was calling for missionaries, and he needed them to go to that part of the world because the Ottoman Empire was redoing all of their roads and restructuring their engineering on so many different things, and the French businessmen had just gotten a contract. So he needed to have French-speaking missionaries in that part of the world. It's amazing. When God wants you to do something, he just makes everything, all the doors open, so that
That's right.
all you need to do is just walk through them and just do God's holy plan. And she got there, and then the next step was, who is she going to find to go up into these mountains? Because she's a nun in a habit. She was able to talk two of the priests into it after a long story, which you really do need to read the book because it's such a fascinating story, even with these priests. And you're going to just love it. You got to get that from Tan Books. And they wound up finding the house, and then they brought in people who were atheists to try to prove it's not the house. You know, they wanted to have, like, the devil's advocate take charge and say, you know, it's definitely not it. But
So what did the archaeologists say at that investigation?
You know, one of them said, I'm so upset because now I do need to believe in there's a higher being because this truly is from it. They were able to take stones that they already had from that time period, and they said, yes, this is exactly the same stone. Then when they were doing some digging, they found skeletons, and the most interesting part is that their head, their hands, and their feet were not pointing to Jerusalem. They were pointing to the house. Mm. And that automatically told them that there was something much more important in that home that they needed to pay attention to. And in their hands, they had the coins from that period of time. So all roads were leading to, yes, this definitely was the place. And what's really interesting is when they did more digging, they came across the fireplace stones that had to be removed from the center of the house, because that's the way it was when the Blessed Mother lived there. They were going to turn it into a chapel. These are the apostles turning it into a chapel. They literally were making almost the first church out of Mary's house. And so they buried these fireplace stones in the back area closer to where they kept the tabernacle. And when they were looking for the round part of where the tabernacle would have been, that's when they found the stones. Hmm. And they gave one of the stones back to Sister Marie. And it's still in the family castle.
Incredible. What an incredible story, the finding of the House of Mary in Ephesus through the work of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey. What an amazing backstory for somebody who's being considered for sainthood. We're talking today with Erin Von Uffel, the promoter of the canonization cause of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey. And this is a historic cause. Of course, this is from so many years ago, and yet the cause is still being carried on today. What can we look at as far as the status of this cause? I know that she's a servant of God. How will she move on to the next step of Venerable?
Well, we're actually waiting for the postulator over in Rome, Dr. Andrea Ambrosi's office, to write the biography. And they have all the information, so we're hoping that they will do that because then she will be declared the next step. And in the meantime, we are imploring people to pray to Sister Marie. The best part about you listening, anyone out there, you have the possibility of hitting it really big with some huge favor. Most people who pray to Sister Marie do not really know who she is. We've gotten testimonies from people who say, I'm not even Catholic, but I heard she bought the House of Mary, I'm Jewish, I sell houses, and when I pray to her, I sell all my houses. People who have gotten the prayer card, they notice that the prayer card almost acts like a relic, and if it's placed on somebody's body, if it's God's will, they're getting miraculously healed. I can tell you from my own family, my mom, and you know, prophets never taken seriously in their own household, so not that I'm a prophet, but my mom would hear Sister Marie, Sister Marie, Sister Marie, and in one ear, out the other. But when my dad had his toes turn black, all of a sudden she's on the phone saying, what do I do, and what's this about Sister Marie? And I said, well, I'm getting so many testimonies of people placing it on, contacting it with the place of their body and just saying, God, with your glory, please allow Sister Marie to heal this part of my body if it's something that is okay with you. And whether they say the prayer or not, it's happening. They just say, Sister Marie, please intercede in the name of Jesus. And if they say the prayer, that's even better. But the very next day, my mom called and she said his toes were perfect, absolutely perfect. And something that turns black, it doesn't reverse, ever, 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 ever. One of my nephews had retinal blastoma. And he had contact with the prayer card. They placed it on his eye. His mom implored Sister Marie, and Sister Marie started to instruct her on what to do and what not to do for this child. And the doctor to this day calls him the miracle baby. And there's many, many things that have happened with this.
That's wonderful. There are so many cases of graces, intercessions, blessings, favors that we might say through the intercession of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey, who is a servant of God, and hopefully in due time we'll move ahead to Venerable, Blessed, and then Saint. Well, we're so grateful to you, Erin Von Uffel, the promoter of the canonization cause of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey. And if people want to find out more about this incredible future saint, where can they go?
They can go to sistermarie.com, and that's spelled out Fister, Marie.com. They can go to tanbooks.com and purchase the book that has the prayer card in it already. And they can get your Journey of Sister Marie through the EWTRC.com. And just know that even though Sister Marie is from a different time period, she's very active in our world today. She died of a heart attack, and we have many, many, many testimonies regarding people who were supposed to have surgery and then never needed it because of praying to her. And with her having been a pharmacist, she also has been very instrumental in getting people to have the exact medicine that they need, or if there was a medicine that was harming their body, she makes sure that that medicine gets taken out of their medical chart so that it doesn't continue. So that's very important in our world today when people are having all sorts of different things happen and they don't know why. You need to go to Sister Marie and ask her to be in charge of your medical records and pharmaceutical medicine.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Erin Von Uffel, promoter of the canonization cause of Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey, for talking to us about this great future saint. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, and we're hunting for those miracles, so get back in touch with Michael and let him know.
And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest, Roy Wenzel, talking to us about Father Emil Kapuan, and Erin Von Uffel about Sister Marie de Mandat Grancey. Check out my program, Explore with the Miracle Hunter Loretto, which airs on Saturday, June 16th at 6 p.m. Central Time. And the Holy House is where the Virgin Mary is believed to have lived and received the Annunciation. But how did it get from Nazareth to its current home in Italy? I'll be investigating that one. And I'd like to thank you for joining me on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.